The divorce papers felt colder than the marble floors of their Fifth Avenue penthouse. At 24 years old, Audrey Jensen was living a fairy tale, married to the charismatic billionaire heir, Percival Langley, and secretly carrying his child, the future of his dynasty. But the fairy tale shattered the day he handed her a pen and an impossible choice. He told her his family's empire depended on him marrying another woman, a socialite named Penelope Davenport, to secure a corporate merger. Her love, their vows, their unborn child. They were all just inconvenient liabilities. He offered her $10 million to disappear, to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and to never speak his name again. That day, pregnant and heartbroken, she didn't just walk out of his life. She vanished. Little did he know you can't bury a fire and expect it not to rise from the ashes. Life as Audrey Langley was a symphony of quiet luxury. Mornings were filled with the soft clinking of porcelain as their private staff served breakfast on a terrace overlooking Central Park. Afternoons were a curated blur of charity luncheons, gallery openings, and fittings with designers who knew her measurements by heart. She was the wife of Percival Langley, the dashing young CEO of Langley Enterprises, a sprawling real estate and investment conglomerate built by his grandfather. Their love story had been the stuff of tabloids. Audrey Jensen, a brilliant architectural student on a scholarship at Columbia, had caught Percival's eye during a university fundraising gala. He was captivated, not by a social climber, but by a woman who debated structural integrity and sustainable design with more passion than anyone he'd ever met. She saw past the Langley name to the man who loved old jazz records and had a surprisingly goofy laugh. Their whirlwind romance culminated in a wedding that was the social event of the year. For 2 years, the gilded cage felt like heaven. But there were shadows. Percival's mother, Genevieve Langley, was a woman carved from ice and ambition. Her approval was a currency Audrey could never seem to earn. To Genevieve, Audrey was a charming detour, not the strategic alliance the Langley family required. Every polite dinner was an interrogation, every compliment laced with a subtle barb about her middle-class background. Percival had always been her shield. "Don't listen to her, Audrey," he'd murmur, holding her close in their vast, silent bedroom. "It's you and me. That's all that matters." And she believed him. Especially when after months of trying, she saw the 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. She planned the perfect reveal. A tiny pair of baby shoes tucked inside a gift box placed by his plate at dinner. When he opened it, his reaction was everything she dreamed of. His eyes, usually sharp and calculating, softened with pure, unadulterated joy. He knelt before her, pressing his ear to her still flat stomach, whispering promises to their child. An heir. He breathed his voice thick with emotion. The next Langley. My son. Our son. That night they felt invincible. But the invincibility lasted less than a week. The change was subtle at first. Percival became distant, his phone calls were hushed, and he started having late-night meetings with his mother and the family lawyers. The easy laughter vanished, replaced by a constant gnawing tension in his jaw. When Audrey tried to ask, he would brush her off with a curt, "It's just board business, darling. Nothing for you to worry about." The worry, however, was a cold knot in her stomach. It tightened when she overheard Genevieve's voice drifting from Percival's study one afternoon, sharp and venomous. The Davenport merger is paramount. This complication must be handled, swiftly and silently. The confrontation came on a Tuesday. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of their apartment, mirroring the storm brewing inside. Percival stood by the fireplace, not looking at her. On the polished mahogany table between them lay a thick, leather-bound folder. "What is this, Percival?" Audrey asked, her hand instinctively resting on her abdomen. "It's a settlement agreement," he said, his voice flat and unfamiliar. "And divorce papers." The words didn't register. It felt like he was speaking a foreign language. "Divorce? What are you talking about? We're having a baby." He finally turned to face her, and the man she loved was gone. In his place was a stranger, his expression a mask of cold resolution. "The family has been working on a merger with Davenport Consolidated for over a year. It's the most important deal in our company's history. It will secure our legacy for the next century." "What does a business deal have to do with us?" she whispered, her heart beginning to pound a painful rhythm against her ribs. "The final term of the merger," he said, each word a precise, deliberate blow, "is a union between the two families. I am to marry Penelope Davenport. The wedding is in 6 months. Audrey felt the air leave her lungs. She gripped the back of a chair to keep from collapsing. "Penelope Davenport. Your ex-girlfriend, Percival. Tell me this is a joke. A sick, horrible joke." "It's not," he said, his gaze unwavering. "This is business. It's bigger than me. It's bigger than you. It's about the Langley name." "What about our name?" she cried, tears finally breaking free. "What about our child, the heir you were so happy about a week ago?" This at last caused a flicker of something in his eyes, a deep, painful regret that was gone as quickly as it appeared. "The settlement is generous, Audrey. $10 million. You'll sign an NDA. You'll relocate. You'll be comfortable for the rest of your life. You want to buy my silence. You want to pay me to erase our child." The horror of it was a physical sickness. "The child cannot be a Langley," he stated as if reading from a script. "It would compromise the union with the Davenports. It would be a scandal that could tank the entire deal. My mother has been very clear on this." His mother, Genevieve, the puppeteer pulling the strings. "So that's it?" she asked, her voice trembling with a rage that was beginning to eclipse the pain. 2 years of marriage, our baby. It's all just a complication to be handled. I'm sorry, he said, and for a moment he sounded almost human. I truly am. But the decision has been made. He pushed the folder across the table. My lawyer will be in touch. You have until the end of the week to vacate the premises. She looked at the man she thought she knew, the man who had whispered promises to her unborn child, now standing before her as a corporate executioner. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. A strange, chilling calm washed over her. She picked up the folder, not to open it, but to feel its weight, the weight of her life commodified and dismissed. She looked him dead in the eye. You're not just losing a wife and a child, Percival, she said, her voice low and steady. You're losing your soul, and one day you'll search for it, and you'll find that the price you paid was far too high. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the room, out of the penthouse, and out of the life she once knew. She had nothing but the clothes on her back, the new life growing inside her, and a fire of betrayal burning so hot it turned her tears to steam. The first few weeks were a blur of survival. The $10 million felt like blood money, an insult she refused to touch. Her bank accounts linked to Percival's were frozen within hours. Her credit cards were declined. The Langley machine worked with terrifying efficiency, erasing her as if she were a miscalculation on a balance sheet. She was a ghost in the city that had once been her kingdom. She sold the last vestiges of her old life, a pair of diamond earrings Percival had given her for their first anniversary, a designer watch she'd bought with her first big commission as a student. It was enough for a one-way bus ticket and a few months' rent. She chose Portland, Oregon, a city as far in spirit from the cutthroat canyons of Manhattan as she could get. It was a city known for its bridges, a place for new crossings. Her new home was a cramped, second-floor apartment in a walk-up that always smelled of damp and fried onions. The glamour of Fifth Avenue was replaced by the rumble of the Max train and the sirens that punctuated the night. Morning sickness was a brutal reality, made worse by the gnawing anxiety of her predicament. Some days, all she could do was lie on the lumpy mattress, one hand on her belly, and cry. But Audrey Jensen was not built to break. She was an architect. She knew that the strongest structures were built on the firmest foundations, and right now she had to be the foundation for her child. She found a job waiting tables at a small diner, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and a perpetually smiling waitress named Brenda, who took one look at Audrey's haunted eyes and took her under her wing. The work was grueling, her feet ached, but every dollar was a victory, a brick laid in the wall of her new independence. In her spare moments, hunched over a second-hand laptop in the local library, she started to design again. It was the only thing that made her feel whole. She entered online design contests, took on small freelance gigs for pittances, a logo for a local bakery, a floor plan for a garage conversion. It wasn't much, but it kept the fire in her mind from flickering out. Her break came from the most unexpected of places. The diner she worked at was next to a dilapidated century-old building that had been vacant for years. It was an eyesore, but Audrey saw beauty in its bones, in its tired brickwork and arched windows. On her lunch breaks, she would sketch it, reimagining it, not as a ruin, but as a vibrant community arts center. She designed a space with an open-air cafe artist studios and a small theater, all using sustainable materials and preserving the building's historic character. One rainy afternoon, an elderly gentleman sat at one of her tables, nursing a cup of coffee and staring out at the same building. He had a kind face, etched with the lines of a life well lived. "Ugly old thing, isn't it?" he said more to himself than to her. "I think it's beautiful," Audrey replied, pouring him a refill. "It just needs a second chance." Intrigued, the man who introduced himself as Samuel Wright asked her what she meant. On a whim fueled by exhaustion and a desperate need for someone to see her, the real her, she pulled her sketchbook from her bag and showed him her drawings. Samuel, it turned out, was not just a coffee drinker. He was a retired property developer, one of the most respected in Portland before he'd stepped away from the corporate world. He studied her sketches, his eyes sharp and discerning. He saw not just drawings, but a vision. He saw the elegant fusion of old and new, the mastery of light and space, the deep innate talent. "Young lady," he said slowly, looking up from the sketchbook and meeting her eyes. "Who are you?" For the first time in months, she told someone the truth. Not the whole story about Percival and the betrayal, but the part that mattered. "My name is Audrey Jensen. I'm an architect." Samuel tapped a finger on her design for the art center. "This is more than a sketch. This is a masterpiece. I happen to own that ugly old thing next door. I've been wondering what to do with it." He smiled. "It seems you've found the answer." That conversation was the first ray of light in her long, dark tunnel. Samuel Wright became more than a patron. He became a mentor, a friend, a grandfather figure she'd never had. He didn't just offer her the project. He offered her a partnership. He provided the capital and the connections, and she provided the vision. They formed a small company. Audrey needed a name, something that represented her journey. She thought of the mythical bird that is reborn from its own destruction. She called it Phoenix Arch. The transformation of the old Wright building into the Bridgeport Arts Collective became a local sensation. Audrey poured every ounce of her pain, her hope, and her formidable talent into the project. She was on site from dawn until dusk, her pregnant belly growing more prominent under her dusty work clothes. She argued with contractors, charmed city inspectors, and solved complex engineering problems that left seasoned professionals in awe. She wasn't just building a structure, she was rebuilding her life brick by painful brick. The project was where she met Liam Cooper. He was the head of the security consulting firm Samuel hired to secure the site. A former Army Ranger with a quiet intensity and an uncanny ability to read people, Liam saw Audrey's fierce determination and the profound sadness that she tried to hide. He treated her not with pity, but with a deep, unwavering respect. He made sure she had a safe path to her car late at night, often leaving a hot cup of tea on her makeshift desk. He spoke little, but his presence was a steady, reassuring anchor. 9 months after she arrived in Portland, 2 things were born: the Bridgeport Arts Collective and her son, Noah Jensen. Holding Noah in her arms for the first time in the quiet of a simple hospital room, Audrey felt a love so fierce it reordered her universe. Looking at his tiny, perfect face, she saw nothing of Percival. She saw only her son. He was not a painful reminder of the past. He was the reason for her future. Her fight was no longer just for herself. It was for him. The Art Center opened to critical acclaim. It won municipal design awards and was featured in prominent architecture magazines. Suddenly, Phoenix Arch wasn't just a startup. It was the hottest new firm on the West Coast. The phone began to ring. With Samuel's guidance and her own relentless drive, Audrey expanded. She hired a small, dedicated team of young, hungry architects who were drawn to her innovative, human-centric design philosophy. Liam Cooper, having sold his own company, came on board as her chief operating officer. He was her strategist, her protector, and her most trusted confidant. He handled the contracts, the logistics, and the security, freeing her to do what she did best: create. Over the next 5 years, Phoenix Arch grew exponentially. They designed sleek, eco-friendly corporate headquarters in Seattle, luxurious but understated wineries in Napa Valley, and a groundbreaking pediatric hospital in San Francisco that was designed to reduce patient anxiety. Audrey, now known professionally as A.J. Jensen, became a force to be reckoned with. She was notoriously private, never giving interviews or allowing her photo to be taken. Her work spoke for itself. She was a brilliant enigma, the mind behind some of the most iconic new buildings in the country. She was no longer the heartbroken girl who fled New York. She was a CEO, a mother, a survivor. She lived in a beautiful minimalist home she had designed herself, nestled in the hills outside Portland. Her life was full, revolving around Noah's school, Play's weekend hikes in the Columbia River Gorge, and the empire she had built from nothing. The past was a locked room. She never spoke of Percival, never checked for news of him. He was a ghost, a bad dream she had left behind on a rainy Tuesday in another lifetime. But the thing about the past, especially a past connected to a name as powerful as Langley, is that it never truly stays buried. It was only a matter of time before the ghost came knocking. In New York City, Langley Enterprises was facing a crisis of identity. The company, once an industry titan, was now seen as stodgy and old-fashioned. Their designs were uninspired, their profits were stagnating, and they were losing bids to leaner, more innovative firms. Percival Langley, now in his early 30s, was a man shackled by his own legacy. His marriage to Penelope Davenport was a sterile, transactional affair. They were perfect partners on paper and at galas, but strangers in their own home. There was no warmth, no joy, and certainly no children. Penelope had made it clear that her career and social standing were her priorities. The breaking point came with the Hudson Yards Pinnacle project. It was a career-defining opportunity, a multi-billion-dollar skyscraper intended to be the new crown jewel of the Manhattan skyline. Langley Enterprises had put in a bid, but the city's development committee had all but laughed them out of the room. Their proposal was safe and unimaginative. The committee, they were told, was looking for a visionary. Desperate, Percival's team began a frantic search for a partner firm, someone who could bring the wow factor they so desperately lacked. All research pointed to one name, Phoenix Arch. They were the industry disruptors, the artistic visionaries, and their leader, the elusive A.J. Jensen, was a genius. Percival knew he had to land this partnership. His company's future and his own reputation depended on it. After weeks of calls and overtures, a meeting was finally secured. A.J. Jensen and her COO would fly to New York to hear their pitch. The morning of the meeting, the Langley boardroom buzzed with nervous energy. Percival stood by the window, looking down at the city he ruled. He felt a familiar hollowness, a sense that for all his wealth and power, something essential was missing. "They're here," his assistant announced. Percival turned, schooling his features into a mask of confident authority. He walked toward the door, hand outstretched, ready to greet the architects who held his company's fate in their hands. The door opened. First, a tall, imposing man with calm, watchful eyes stepped in. This had to be the COO, Liam Cooper. And then behind him, a woman stepped into the room. She was wearing a sharply tailored navy blue suit, her honey blonde hair pulled back in a sleek, elegant chignon. She was poised, confident, and radiating an aura of power that commanded the attention of everyone in the room. But it wasn't her power that made Percival's blood run cold. It was her face. It was older, yes. The softness of youth had been honed into the sharp, beautiful lines of a woman who had faced the world and won. The naive trust in her eyes had been replaced by a cool, intelligent fire. But it was her. It was Audrey. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The air rushed from Percival's lungs. For a moment, he couldn't hear anything but the frantic pounding of his own heart. The name on the file clicked into place. A.J. Jensen. Audrey Jensen. How could he have been so blind? Audrey's expression was perfectly neutral. There was no shock, no flicker of recognition. She looked at him as if he were a complete stranger, a minor obstacle in her path. Liam Cooper stepped forward. "Percival Langley. I presume I'm Liam Cooper, COO of Phoenix Arch. And this is our founder and CEO, A.J. Jensen." Audrey extended a hand, her movements fluid and controlled. "Mr. Langley," she said, her voice the same smooth melody he remembered, but now with an edge of steel. "Thank you for arranging this meeting." Percival felt like he was moving through water as he took her hand. Her touch was brief, cool, and utterly professional. It was the handshake of a shark, not the woman who had once held his face in her hands and whispered that she loved him. He finally found his voice, a strangled rasp. "Ms. Jensen, the pleasure is all mine. I wasn't aware. Aware of what Mr. Langley," she asked, one perfectly sculpted eyebrow raised. "That the best architect in the country would be a woman, or were you expecting someone older?" The polite, dismissive question was a slap in the face. She was in complete control. She had known exactly who she was walking in to meet. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a reckoning. He led them to the boardroom table, his mind reeling. Genevieve, his mother, who was also present as a board member, stared at Audrey, her face a mask of disbelief and fury. The woman she had exiled had returned not as a beggar, but as a queen. The meeting began. Audrey was brilliant. She didn't pitch, she commanded. She laid out a vision for the Hudson Yards pinnacle that was breathtaking in its scope and genius. She spoke of kinetic facades, vertical gardens, and a design that was not just a building, but a living, breathing part of the city. She dismantled the Langley proposal with surgical precision, not out of spite, but with cold, irrefutable logic. Percival could barely follow the technical details. He was watching the woman he had thrown away command a room of the most powerful people in New York City with an ease that left him breathless. He saw the fire he had first fallen in love with, now forged into an unbreakable weapon. And then, as she concluded her presentation, she put up one final slide. It was a rendering of the building's public plaza. In the center was a small, beautifully designed children's park and learning center. "The heart of any legacy project," Audrey said, her cool gaze sweeping the room before landing on Percival, "is not what it does for us, but what it leaves for the next generation. For our children." The word hung in the air between them, heavy and unspoken. Children. The ghost of the past was no longer knocking. It had just kicked down the door and taken a seat at the head of the table. The Langley board was stunned into silence, then erupted into a wave of enthusiastic approval. They had never seen anything like Audrey's proposal. It was audacious, brilliant, and exactly what they needed. The decision was unanimous. They had to partner with Phoenix Arch, whatever the cost. For Percival, the meeting was just the beginning of the torment. He was now forced into a professional relationship with the woman whose life he had destroyed. Every interaction was a masterclass in psychological warfare, executed with chilling precision by Audrey. In their first private negotiation, he tried to breach the topic. "Audrey, we need to talk." "My name is Ms. Jensen," she corrected him, not looking up from the contract she was reviewing. "And the only thing we need to discuss, Mr. Langley, is the revised fee structure. My firm's time is considerably more valuable than your initial offer reflects." She treated him with a polite, impenetrable disdain that was more painful than any screaming match could have been. She knew his business inside and out, his weaknesses, his vanity, his desperate need for this project to succeed. She exploited every one of them. She renegotiated every clause, demanded full creative control, and structured the deal so that Phoenix Arch, not Langley Enterprises, was the lead partner. He was a client in his own boardroom. Genevieve Langley was apoplectic. She tried to intervene, summoning Audrey to a private lunch at the Grill, a classic New York power broker restaurant. She intended to intimidate the girl she had once dismissed. The meeting did not go as she planned. Audrey arrived looking every bit Genevieve's equal, in a bespoke suit and an air of unshakable confidence. "I had hoped your unfortunate situation had resolved itself quietly." Genevieve began, her voice dripping with venom. "My situation is a multi-million-dollar corporation, Mrs. Langley," Audrey replied calmly, sipping her water. "And it's the only thing standing between your company and complete irrelevance. So I would choose your next words very carefully." Genevieve tried to threaten her, hinting at revealing Audrey's past. Audrey laughed, a short, sharp sound, devoid of humor. "Reveal what? That your son abandoned his pregnant wife for a business deal, that you orchestrated it. Please go to the press. My story is one of resilience and triumph. Yours is a sordid tale of greed and moral bankruptcy. Whose side do you think the public will take?" Genevieve left the lunch, shaken, and for the first time in her life, powerless. The girl she had tried to crush had become indestructible. Percival, meanwhile, was falling apart. Working with Audrey daily was a constant, brutal reminder of what he had lost. He saw the ghost of their shared smiles in her rare, professional ones. He heard the echo of their late-night conversations in her sharp, insightful business commentary. The hollow space in his life now had a name and a face, and she was sitting across the table from him, dismantling his legacy. His desperation grew. He needed to know about the child. His child. He did something he knew was a violation. He had his private security team, a different firm from Liam's, run a background check on Audrey. The report came back within a day. It contained a picture of Audrey in a park in Portland, laughing as she pushed a small boy on a swing. The boy had her smile, but his eyes, they were Percival's. His name was Noah Jensen, age 5.5. The photograph knocked the wind out of Percival. It was real. A son. His son. A boy who should have been learning the Langley name, who should have been sitting on his shoulders, was a happy, smiling stranger, a continent away. The $10 million he had offered Audrey to make this problem disappear now seemed like the most grotesque insult imaginable. He confronted her after a late-night planning session, cornering her as she waited for the elevator. "I know," he said, his voice raw. "I know about Noah." Audrey's calm facade finally cracked. A flash of pure protective fury ignited in her eyes. "You stay away from him," she snarled, her voice a low, dangerous whisper. "You gave up the right to even say his name the day you handed me those papers." "He's my son, Audrey. He is my son." She shot back, stepping closer, her anger a palpable force. "I was the one who was sick every morning while working 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads. I was the one who held him when he had a fever, who went to his parent-teacher conferences, who tucked him in every single night for 5 years. Where were you, Percival? Oh, that's right. You were closing a deal. You were marrying another woman. You don't have a son. You have a stock portfolio." The elevator doors opened. Liam Cooper was standing inside, his expression unreadable, but his posture radiating menace. He had clearly been waiting. Audrey stepped in without a backward glance. "The project, Mr. Langley," she said as the doors began to close, "is the only thing we will ever have in common. Do not forget that again." As Percival stood alone in the empty hallway, the reality of his choice crashed down on him with the force of a wrecking ball. He had traded a life for a legacy, and he was beginning to suspect he had lost both. At the same time, a new twist was emerging. Liam, ever watchful, had noticed irregularities in the Langley Davenport financials. Penelope Davenport, it seemed, was more than just a cold corporate wife. She was ambitious, and as Liam was beginning to suspect, deeply corrupt. He started a quiet, discreet investigation of his own, believing that in any war, you needed to know everything about your enemy's allies. What he would find was a secret that would not just rock the foundation of the Langley family, but shatter it completely. Liam Cooper was methodical. While Audrey waged her war in the boardroom, he moved through the shadows of the corporate world, using his extensive network of security and financial investigation contacts. The irregularities he'd spotted were the tip of a very large, very ugly iceberg. Penelope Davenport wasn't just ambitious. She was a corporate raider, hiding in plain sight. For years, she had been using her position within the merged company to create shell corporations, funneling Langley funds into high-risk side ventures under her own name. More damningly, she was systematically leaking proprietary information about the Hudson Yards Pinnacle project to a rival developer, the formidable titan of industry, Kendrick Shaw. Her plan was simple: devalue Langley Enterprises from the inside, trigger a hostile takeover by Shaw at a fraction of its worth, and secure a lucrative executive position and a massive payout for herself in the new company. Her marriage to Percival was nothing more than a 5-year corporate espionage mission. Liam compiled a dossier filled with irrefutable proof-encrypted emails, offshore bank statements, and recorded conversations between Penelope and Shaw's associates. He presented it to Audrey in her hotel suite, the Manhattan skyline glittering coldly outside the window. Audrey read through the file, her expression hardening with each page. She felt no satisfaction, only a grim sense of finality. She saw the full scope of the rot at the heart of the Langley empire, a rot that had begun with their decision to cast her out. "This doesn't just damage Percival," Liam said quietly. "This could destroy the entire company. Shaw will pick the bones clean." Audrey looked at the file, then at the city. For a moment, she considered letting it happen. Let them burn. Let the empire Percival and his mother valued more than human life turn to ash. It would be poetic justice. But then she thought of the project. The pinnacle was her design, her vision. It was a testament to her survival, a monument she was building for her future. She wouldn't let Penelope Davenport or Kendrick Shaw tear it down. And a small, complicated part of her realized she wouldn't let Percival's entire world collapse because of a choice he was manipulated into making as a young man under the thumb of his mother. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a recognition of a shared, tangled history. "Schedule an emergency board meeting," she told Liam, "and make sure Percival and his mother are both there." The atmosphere in the Langley boardroom 2 days later was electric with tension. Percival and Genevieve sat at the head of the table, believing Audrey had called the meeting to make another power play for the project. Penelope was also present, looking bored and irritated, tapping a perfectly manicured nail on her tablet. Audrey didn't waste time with pleasantries. She had Liam project the first piece of evidence onto the main screen, a wire transfer from a Langley subsidiary account to a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands, an account owned by Penelope. Penelope's face went pale. "This is absurd. My signature has been forged." "Has it?" Audrey asked, her voice calm as she nodded to Liam. He played the next exhibit, an audio recording. Penelope's crisp, clear voice could be heard negotiating with an associate of Kendrick Shaw. "The structural weaknesses in the foundation proposal are the key. Once that's leaked, Langley's stock will tank by 20%. Shaw can move in then." The room was utterly silent. Genevieve looked as if she had been turned to stone. Percival stared at his wife, the woman he had sacrificed his family for, with a look of pure, unadulterated shock. The transactional nature of their marriage had been a known fact, but this level of betrayal was beyond comprehension. Audrey laid out the entire conspiracy piece by damning piece. By the end, Penelope was exposed, her treachery laid bare for the entire board to see. Percival finally broke his silence. He rose to his feet, his eyes locked on his mother. His voice was quiet, but it resonated with a lifetime of suppressed anger. "This is your doing," he said, the accusation hanging in the air. "You pushed for this merger. You pushed for this woman. You told me it was the only way to secure our legacy." He let out a harsh, broken laugh. "She was setting fire to the legacy while you hosted dinner parties." I couldn't have known," Genevieve stammered, her composure finally shattering. "Couldn't you?" Percival shot back, his voice rising. "Or did you just see what you wanted to see? You wanted a daughter-in-law from the right family with the right name. You didn't care about the person. You destroyed my life, my real life, for a lie. For a hostile takeover dressed in a wedding gown." He turned from his mother and faced Audrey. The rage drained away, replaced by a profound, bottomless regret. He saw everything with a terrifying clarity, now the trap he had been in, the weakness that had made him comply, the magnitude of what he had thrown away. "Audrey," he began, his voice cracking. "I don't," she said, holding up a hand. Her expression wasn't triumphant or smug. It was just weary. "I didn't do this for you, Percival. I did this for my project. and I did it to protect my company from the fallout of yours." She gathered her files, her movements crisp and efficient. "The authorities have already been alerted about Ms. Davenport's activities. I'll leave you to deal with your family." She and Liam walked out of the boardroom, leaving the ruins of the Langley dynasty behind them. As the door clicked shut, Percival finally understood the words she had spoken to him 5 years earlier. He had lost his soul, and the price he paid was far, far too high. The silence that followed Audrey's departure from the boardroom was heavier than any sound. It was the sound of an empire cracking at its very core. Percival stood motionless, the damning evidence still glowing on the screen, the ghost of Penelope's treachery and his mother's catastrophic ambition poisoning the air. He looked at Genevieve, who for the first time in his life looked small and utterly defeated. The icy armor had shattered, revealing the frail, frightened woman beneath. There was no grand confrontation, left no fire. The war was over, and they had lost. The fallout was a public spectacle and a private hell. Penelope Davenport's arrest became the lead story on every major news network, her perfectly coiffed mugshot, a symbol of corporate greed. The ensuing scandal ripped through the financial world, sending Langley Enterprises stock into a nosedive. The Davenport family, in a desperate act of self-preservation, severed all ties, initiating a maelstrom of lawsuits that threatened to bleed the Langleys dry. In the midst of the chaos, Percival called a final private meeting with his mother in the cavernous library of the family estate, a room that had always felt more like a mausoleum for their legacy than a home. "You're stepping down from the board," he said. It was not a request. "You'll transfer your voting shares to me and retire. You'll have no further involvement in the company." Genevieve looked at him, her eyes hollow. "After everything I did, to protect this family, to build, you didn't protect it." "Mother," Percival interrupted, his voice, devoid of heat, filled instead with a chilling finality. "You hollowed it out. You valued a name on a letterhead more than the people who carried it. You traded my soul for a merger with a viper. The family you wanted to protect is gone. It's just me now cleaning up the ruins." His words hung between them, irrefutable. The matriarch's reign had ended, not with a bang, but with the quiet, devastating truth. Left to navigate the wreckage, Percival worked with a single-minded, almost manic intensity. He sold off vanity assets, restructured billions in debt, and faced down hostile board members and terrified investors. In the crucible of this crisis, the entitled heir was burned away, leaving a man forged in failure and regret. He was fighting not for legacy or for pride, but for simple survival. Throughout it all, construction on the Hudson Yards pinnacle continued, an unyielding monolith rising against the Manhattan skyline. It was the one part of his professional life he couldn't control. The project was governed by an ironclad contract that made Phoenix Arch the unassailable lead. Audrey, or Ms. Jensen, as she was exclusively known, was in charge. Their interactions were sparse, conducted through layers of staff or during mandatory site visits. During one such visit, standing on the skeletal 50th floor with the wind whipping around them, they were forced to confer over a structural schematic. "The wind shear calculations for the upper spire need to be re-verified with the new glazing specifications," Audrey stated, her tone crisp as she pointed to a detail on the blueprint. She didn't look at him, her focus entirely on the work. "I'll have my engineering team run the models again," Percival replied, his voice subdued. He was no longer the commanding CEO. In her presence, he was a subordinate, a client. He found himself studying the determined set of her jaw, the way her eyes lit up when she solved a problem, all the things he once took for granted. The chasm between them felt as vast and empty as the sky surrounding them. "It's A remarkable design, Audrey. He added the name slipping out before he could stop it. She finally looked at him, her gaze cool and unreadable. It will be a landmark, Mr. Langley. That was the contract. She folded the blueprint, the snap of the paper, echoing the finality of her tone, and walked away to speak with the foreman. Months bled into a year. In Portland, Audrey watched her son, Noah, grow. He was bright, inquisitive, and full of laughter. He was her whole world, the vibrant, living proof that her life had a purpose far beyond corporate battles and broken vows. But as he grew older, questions began to surface. He would see his friends with their fathers at school events and ask with the simple, heartbreaking innocence of a child, "Mum, do I have a daddy?" Audrey had always answered honestly, but simply telling him his father lived far away and that their family was perfect just the way it was. Yet she saw the flicker of longing in his eyes. The conversation sparked a deep, painful conflict within her. Was she protecting Noah from the man who had abandoned them, or was she letting her own wounds deny her son a part of his identity? One evening, as she sat with Liam on the terrace of her home, watching the city lights begin to sparkle below, she finally gave voice to her turmoil. "Percival has been making inquiries through his lawyers," she said quietly. "He wants to establish a trust for Noah. He wants to know about his school, his health." Liam, her steadfast COO and most trusted friend, remained silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "And what do you want?" he asked, his voice gentle. He never presumed to advise her on this, the most personal part of her life. "I want to protect my son," she whispered. "I'm terrified of letting that world, that family, poison him. But I look at him, and I see Percival's eyes looking back at me. I don't want Noah to grow up with a void, a question mark where a father should be." "Whatever you decide," Liam said, turning to her, his expression full of the unwavering respect she valued so much, "it will be the right decision, because you will be the one making it. You're not that woman in New York anymore. You hold all the power now." His words resonated. She did hold the power, and with that power came the responsibility to wield it for Noah's best interest, even if it meant confronting the ghost she had long since buried. 2 weeks later, Percival flew to Portland. He didn't request a meeting or attempt to force an encounter. He went to Laurelhurst Park, a place his researchers had told him Audrey and Noah often visited. He sat on a bench under the canopy of autumn leaves, feeling like a supplicant at a shrine. He waited for hours, his heart a cold, heavy stone in his chest. Finally he saw them. Audrey was pushing Noah on a swing, her face relaxed and filled with a luminous joy that he had never seen, not even in their happiest moments together. The sound of his son's delighted laughter was the most beautiful and painful thing he had ever heard. It was a perfect, complete world, and he was an outsider, a ghost observing a life he had forfeited. He didn't move. He simply watched, drinking in the sight of the son he had never known. Eventually, Audrey's gaze drifted and found him. Her smile vanished, her body instantly tensing with a protective instinct. She spoke a few quiet words to Noah, who scrambled off the swing and ran toward the playground structure. With slow, deliberate steps, Audrey walked across the grass and stopped a few feet from his bench. "What are you doing here, Percival?" Her voice wasn't angry. It was exhausted. "I didn't come to ask you to forgive me," he said, his voice raw, looking up at the woman who was both a stranger and the most familiar person in the world to him. "I know I don't deserve that. And I didn't come to ask for a second chance. I destroyed that the day I let my mother convince me that a company was worth more than a family." His gaze shifted to Noah, who was now scaling a climbing wall with fearless determination. "I came to ask for a chance to be his father." not to replace what you've done. Never that. You are his world, but just to be present, to support him, to let him know that he has a father who is so sorry, and who would give anything to be a part of his life in any way you'll allow. He had rehearsed 100 speeches, but in the end it was just the simple, unvarnished truth. He wasn't a billionaire asking for terms. He was a father begging. Audrey studied him for a long, silent minute. She saw the lines of sleepless nights etched around his eyes, the absence of the easy arrogance he once wore like a second skin. She saw the man he had become in the ruins of the life he had chosen. Her decision, she realized, had already been made. It was for Noah. "It would be slow, Percival," she said, her voice measured and firm. "It would start with letters. Then maybe phone calls. Every step would be on my terms, with boundaries. And the moment you hurt him or disappoint him, it's over. He is my entire world, and his well-being is not negotiable." A wave of profound relief washed over Percival, so powerful it almost buckled his knees. Tears he hadn't realized he'd been holding back streamed down his face. "Thank you, Audrey." He choked out the words thick with unshed grief and a fragile, nascent hope. "That's more than I deserve." It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was no passionate reunion, no sudden reversal of time. It was the beginning of a new foundation, laid cautiously, brick by brick, on the rubble of the old one. 3 years later, Audrey stood on the soaring observation deck of the Hudson Yards pinnacle at dusk. The building was complete, a gleaming testament to her vision that had reshaped the skyline of the city that once cast her out. Liam stood beside her, a comfortable and reassuring presence, their partnership a quiet pillar of her life. Below in the public plaza she saw 2 figures. Percival, looking older and more settled, was pointing up at the magnificent spire. Beside him, holding his hand, was Noah. His face tilted toward the sky in wonder. He waved a small, happy gesture to the building itself, not knowing his mother was watching from its highest point. A soft, peaceful smile touched Audrey's lips. Percival was a part of their lives, a tentative, careful presence. He was a father to Noah, but her life, her world, was her own. She was not a Langley. She was Audrey Jensen, the woman who had risen from the ashes, not to reclaim a past she never truly wanted, but to build a future that was entirely breathtakingly her own. She was the architect, and this was her masterpiece. And so Audrey's story isn't just one of revenge, it's a powerful testament to resilience. It shows us that the end of one chapter, no matter how painful, can be the foundation for an even greater one. She didn't just rebuild her life, she designed a future grander than anything she had ever lost. But the question remains, can a betrayal that deep ever be truly forgiven? Can Percival ever fully earn back a place in his son's life, and perhaps in Audrey's? What do you think the future holds for them? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by Audrey's incredible journey from heartbreak to triumph, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs a story of strength and perseverance. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss another unforgettable story. Thank you for listening.